Morning and welcome to the Yarn Wizard Knit and Crochet Studio. I am your host, Evelyn St. Dennis, and I live in London, Ontario, Canada, where I want to talk to you about anything yarn related as it pertains to knit and crochet. Sometimes quilting, sometimes a little bit of cross stitch, sometimes a little bit of English paper piecing, but mainly it will be about knitting and crochet. So let me introduce myself. This is my first video. I have been knitting and crocheting for a very long time. I am a German native living here in Canada. And I learned knit and crochet at a very early age in Germany. All of my family craft one thing or another. My grandmother was a seamstress. My mother embroidered heavily, and everybody that I knew either knitted or crocheted or did something. So I was surrounded by this all the time, and of course you did learn it in school. They don't teach it anymore now, but they did at that time, and we've just always taken it for granted that that knowledge is there. When I came to Canada, I realized that people here don't knit and crochet as much as they did in Europe. And I think part of that was through the war years, growing up over there, people had to make their own things. Commercially, there was not tons of stuff available. So you just always been surrounded by it. Now, fast forward a gazillion years to this YouTube universe where everything you want to learn is globally available. It's actually pretty amazing and pretty incredible. I myself moved away from knitting and crochet for many years until my niece came back with some knitted items, and I wasn't really impressed with the knitting. Not that I wasn't impressed with the knitting, but I wasn't surprised at the knitting. But what I was surprised at is she had all these funky needles and funky tools and all of that, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go right to the yarn shop and go and get myself some of that, because really I'm all about the tools here. So my love was reborn, and coming back to knitting and crocheting as an adult, but having a base knowledge as a child was actually very interesting. I knitted and crocheted a lot as a young woman. However, when I came back, my style had changed according to how my brain grew. So what I mean by that is that by nature, I'm rather inquisitive and I'm very logical when I lay out things or when I think through things. I'm a rather fast thinker, which sometimes gets me into trouble, and I question a lot more about things. Where when I was a child, for example, or a teenager really, and we knitted these scarves, and you knew you had to stop somewhere between the hip and the knee, because if you wore that scarf for like a couple of weeks, chances are you're going to trip on it and fall, because the stretch of that thing was just going to be like unbelievable, really. Like you're almost doubling that thing. Now, why did that happen? I don't know. It just did. You just knew that, and you incorporated that into your knitting style. Now, fast forward all of these years, and I'm coming back as an adult, and there's YouTube available and many different viewpoints, and you can click on it and there it is, and everybody talks about something different. It became apparent that actually, oh, yarn has different properties. Memory, blah, blah, blah. It's like, where did all of this come from? And then, of course, because there is so much information available, and logical thinker, need to know, I just consumed lot of information rather fast because I had a very large foundation to build on. So the things that I never did question as a teen or as a young woman, when I needed things for my daughter, all of a sudden it became a completely different knitting as an adult, coming back to it. And because I knew a lot, and then I talked to a lot of knitters, and I started teaching, which was a natural progression of what was going on in my life and my interests and so on and so forth. And I've been asked to be the yarn wizard for Yarnspiration Canada at Michael's when they had the pilot project here in London. And of course I want to be the yarn wizard. Like, are you kidding me? You're going to talk about yarn for 2 days of the week, all day, and you get paid for it. Like, I wouldn't even know what would be a better thing than that. I can't even imagine. And I realized a few things. So, I mean, even in my teaching background, like how my setup is kind of like logical and has a progression based on a good foundation, I realized that many self-taught knitters or crocheters actually don't get that. Where would they get that? You can break rules and you can do all kinds of things. However, the rules have always been implemented by something. There is a reason why they are there. Now, this is, of course, realizing that there is a gazillion ways to do things, not just one. And whatever I convey or talk about, there's always more than one way of doing it. I might show you 2 or 3 different ways. However, I realize there is probably 50 more ways of doing it. And that brings me actually to another point. When you want to learn about yarn or knitting or crocheting or whatever craft that you want to do, there's a gazillion teachers out there, and not every teacher speaks to every student. So what does that mean? We have different ways of how we learn. So if I have 1 or 2 or 3 different ways of teaching, it's kind of dimensional, because if you have, let's say, I don't know, you're an auditor learner or you're a visual learner or whatever it is. So there is a teacher out there for everything. So if there is a craft that you want to master and you just can't get the hang of it, just flick through YouTube. There must be like a gazillion ways to do one thing. And when you get to the teacher that actually explains things in the way that it makes sense to your brain, because all of the brains in the world are different. We have some commonalities, but we really are different. Once you get to that teacher, good for you, because then it'll click and you're going to think, oh, I don't know why this was so complicated. It's actually not. And that's actually what it is. So I'm going to be one of many, many people that talk about yarn and what they think about yarn and what to do with yarn. So I'm just part of a big collective. So my thought was that what I want to talk about is not so much about what can you knit, what can you buy, what patterns are out there. There are a gazillion teachers out there and a gazillion knitters out there, or crocheters, and they can teach that the same as me or better or what have you. I wasn't going to go in that direction because generally I don't buy a huge yarn haul. I do buy yarn hauls, but for things to live in my stash, they need to be on sale. And that is when I buy. I very seldom just buy just because I love something. I do occasionally do that, but generally my budget actually is not in that category that I can say, well, let's just go and buy $500 worth of yarn. That seldom happens. However, even having said that, there is such a thing as a stash. Tiny, bigger, huge. I belong to the later parts. And as you mature as a knitter or crocheter, what happens is that your interest or your knowledge or your likes in your stash changes. So you're going to have all kinds of different yarns. So maybe this year you're into cotton, next year you're into 100% wool, before you bought acrylics. Like, there's all kinds of things that happen as we mature as crafters. So as I was cleaning out my space, I thought that is a very good spot to start a video on or to talk about. So when I was looking at my space, and keep in mind that I do come from a crafting family. I have 3 sisters, and we all craft. My daughter craft. She is the owner operator of Mad Bags on Facebook, and many of these creations back here that help you organize your work are on her Facebook website. The other half is done by myself on my website as the Modern Needle, and I get into that a little bit later. But since my whole family crafts, my niece knits, my other niece knits, crochets, and stitches on and off all the time. My sisters crochet, knit, quilt, cross stitch. We do a little bit of everything, or a lot, or whichever way you want to have it. However, we're all different. There is the 3 of us here in Canada. I have a sister in Germany. But we're all a little bit different. But when we talk about cleaning up the stash, we're always cleaning up the stash. And when I had a conversation with my sister, I actually realized a couple of things, and I thought I'll just throw it out there for whatever it is worth. So figure out, what kind of a crafter are you? What kind of a crafter am I? I need to have my stuff hanging out all the time. I want to look at my yarn. I want to see like everything. I want to have glass on everything. I want to have plastic on everything. Like I need to have bags that are kind of like this, because I want to see inside and I want to see what's there. I need to see my stuff. So whatever does that translate to? You come into my living room, into my creative space, and you're going to think, oh my God, is she a hoarder? Or, wow. Now, obviously, if you're a fellow knitter or crocheter or fiber lover, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's like a little superstore and blah, blah, blah. But that is not how it starts out. So we're always cleaning stash. And when we're talking about cleaning stash, one of the things that I noticed is I have way more stuff than I actually have space for. So what does that mean? What happens is I carry things from here and I put them over here, and because I need to have it all hanging out, all of my cupboards are empty because everything is out here. But that's kind of how it works. So I was thinking, okay, so you're a fairly intelligent woman. Like, what is the issue here? So when you're cleaning up your stash, the first thing that I want to address is just clean up your space. When I first started quilting, and that's a whole other thing where fabric makes a huge mess, my kids were never allowed to eat at the kitchen table. That just didn't really happen. It's like, go and eat on the living room table. Like, what do you mean you need a space? Or in recent years, my son had said, as they were growing up with my creative mess, you know, Mom, I would sit with you a whole lot more often and watch TV with you, but there really isn't space for me down here. And that actually brought me to a point of where I was thinking, we're in at a time where everybody's like, go girl, do you, you're worth it, etc. However, we kind of don't live in a bubble. So for me, the thought was like, I want to clean up my space, keeping it creative, not carrying it from point A to point B, knowing what kind of a crafter that I am. Um, Honestly, I love people when I walk into a crafting room and everything is closed off and it's clean and it's airy and it's spacious, and I think, oh my God, that is so awesome. Like the things I could do in here. Well, I know the things I could do in here could make a huge mess because that's just how I work. And to me, it doesn't look like a mess. But to be honest with you, to other people it does. So my thought was, figure out what kind of a creator are you. Do you need to have everything nicely cleaned off behind cupboards and the doors are closed and okay, you walk in and you wouldn't even know that you're a creator? Or are you the kind that I need 3 chairs around me that have all my stuff on it just in case I get tired of knitting these socks? I need to have this blanket and I need to have a future project sitting here, and this is my past project. It's just how it is. So since that is me, I want to address that point more than any other crafter, because I think if you're the one that just has everything behind a cupboard and all of that, that's your goddess, really. Like, I think I admire that. Like, my niece, if she comes into my crafting space, even though she is a crafter herself, is completely overwhelmed. My daughter, who is a bag maker, comes into my space and she's like, Mom, how do you find anything in here? Well, I don't know where my stuff is. At first, I think I kind of took mildly offense to it, but moving on in years, I'm kind of realizing that there is all kinds of different crafters, and that is not good or bad or wrong or whatever, but figure out who you are. That'll help you in managing your space and getting a handle on your stash. So the first thing that I wanted to do when I was thinking about cleaning out my stash is, how do I organize it that I'm not carrying it from point A to point B? And what is it really that I like? Yes, I like everything behind glass, or not. Cubbies are great. However, do I need to have it all in my living space? Or can it be on bookshelves in the hallway where I can walk by and I can just stand there and I can think, this is just heaven on a shelf? Or do I need to have it all down here? Like, what is it that I need? So I answered those questions for myself, and being a sewer and a quilter, and I do quilt, and I sell a lot of my finished products. I knit and I sell a lot of my finished projects. I knit for, I sample knit for yarn stores. I sample knit for designers, or test knit, how you want to call them. So I always have a gazillion projects on the go, a gazillion ideas. But where I started with is, what do I need right now to help me clean and organize my space? So before I even cleaned anything, I think it was weeks and weeks that I had talked to my sister in Germany that has a huge fabric stash, and she has dyed. She was into dyeing for a little bit and all of this stuff. So we all have our little things. And I was saying, I get tired of carrying everything back and forth and I don't know where it is. So one of the things that I actually came up with that I've already used successfully for the last month and a half is a couch caddy. And I show you what that is. Okay, that is this. So this sits at the end of the couch, and as I said before, I knit, I crochet, and I cross stitch. And I was talking to my sister, who she does not knit or crochet because her attention is so tight that her hands hurt on a regular basis. So that's actually not where her joy is. She loves it when we knit and crochet for her, and she's completely knit and crochet worthy. However, that is not her thing. So when living in Canada, the spaces are huge. You go for drives all the time. However, you can't be doing nothing while you're driving, just looking around. That's just not floating the boat. So one of the things that she was saying is that when she is in the car and she's doing English paper piecing, she just has a really hard time getting organized, like having all of her stuff. So I was looking at couch caddies and I thought, why don't I make one of those for her? And then we'll see, like she can have her little English paper piecings and her little threads up here, and she'll have a little ort bag, which is a little garbage bag for threads here. There are a gazillion pockets for mine, of course, have knitting needles in it. You can put your thread on the things. You can have your needle threader in here. You can have your scissor on here. You can have all kinds of things in here that normally clutter up half of my table if it's for me. And for her in the car, she can just lean it or fold it over her leg. Let's pretend this is the leg. And then you get to a gas station or you need to get out of the car. You fold them together. Hers has a little snap button in the bottom here. She can put that in her stitching bag. This here, try to get the glare off. This here is a matching cross stitch stitching pouch. I like mine on I have my stitching on these boards here. So I wanted to have one without a zipper. But we do have them with scissors, of course, where you can just fold them in. But for my purposes, it was what I wanted. I can just slide it in. Here it is. No zippers, no anything. They are on the website. I made it matching to my pouch because I love that fabric. So okay, it took me an hour to set this up. 10 minutes to destroy it, or 2 seconds to destroy it is more like it. However, so I was thinking of what it is that I can do in my space to clean things up. So this here was number one. And because I also stitch, cross stitch, what I did with mine is, this here is a strip of batting. My filled up needle can go in here, and the legend with my whatever is loaded on that needle can be up here. So that works. And then for the couch, as an added bonus, I found no more looking for the remote control, because I can stick it right in here, because actually I lose everything on that couch. I'm pretty sure it eats everything. But I haven't lost a knitting needle or a crochet hook since I came up with those little doodads. Well, if I didn't stick them in here, then that's kind of where they are. Another thing that that kind of helped me organize my immediate space was I hate using elastics for things, because elastics dry up and get brittle and break. And if you have them on your pattern or on your yarn or on your little tins or whatever, they're kind of hard to get off. So what I like here is I reuse everything. This is not a commercial for fast food, but I wash these cups out and I use them for everything, because they have a little hole with this dome on the top. It's great because even if you knock them over, which happens to me all the time, nothing happens because they kind of get caught. So anyways, these are hair elastics and you can buy them at the dollar store. Not very expensive. I don't know what you get, like 20 or 10 or whatever for a buck. I love these for everything. Not only do I make my own stitch markers, I love the ones that don't have the metal clip on them, but if they do, it's not a big deal. If I need stitch markers, I show you real fast how I do them. I just, well, actually, I need a crochet hook. I thought okay. I hold it over my finger. I have the hook under here. Click it through here. Pull it tight. I'll do one on this side here. That'll be a smaller one. Okay. Pull it through and pull it tight. And get two out of one. And I just created two elastic stitch markers, a bigger one and a smaller one. I like that because they're elasticized. I don't have to put down my hands when I want to slide these. I can just pick them up and slip them over. They don't scratch the needle. They don't irritate my ears or anything. And I can get like a gazillion out of one little package for $1. So that's one way that I use these. The other way that I use them is I have a million tins that I put scissors and there's a yarn threader. Scissors and all kinds of things in it, like stitch markers, scissors, yarn needle, blah, blah, blah. I put them in here. And this one here fits pretty tight. Well, I would put an elastic on it just because I don't like things tipped. I secure them like this in my bag and I know nothing is going to happen. So that helps me clean up my space here. The other thing that I use all the, the other thing that I use all the time that also helps me clean up my space is, and this is what tends to make a mess around my space because you can have everything just sitting there. So what I do like buying is I like these clips or these itty bitty hair clips that are actually not good for anything. They're not even good for baby hair because they're just too hard or whatever. But for what I use them, they're just perfect. And let me show you how I use them to clean up my yarn. So here is a pair of worsted weight boot socks. This is my thread tail. There's a little one in there. These are not my favorite clips. I do like them little, or I use these and I clip them on. They stop the yarn ball from collapsing. They stop me from chasing these ends everywhere. And now this can go into my stash or stash cleanup, and I know I won't have to worry about anything coming off. So obviously I handled that ball a few times too many because it's not really clipped on what it should be. So here you go. This is the thread end and it's clipped on and it'll be good. And I don't have to worry about anything happening to that. So, another thing that I made to clean up my personal space, because the reality is if you're always knitting something different, you need different needles. If I knit a top-down sweater and I come to the spot where I need to put the arms on hold, instead of using waste yarn or a yarn holder, like, sorry, I do have them, but I actually don't like them. I think that they're a waste of time. For me, what I do use is I just use a smaller needle, and the smaller needles you can find on sale all the time, or before they came out with all of these exchangeable needles, you could buy, or all you had was fixed needles, and I have a lot. They have, the cords were not as good or whatever, but you have a lot, so you're actually not getting rid of them. So how do you organize them? Before, I actually had no idea. So they were rolled together. I had them in Ziploc bags. I had them in binders. I had them in pencil cases. I had them all over the place. Then I ended up using my favorite elastics to kind of clip them in like that, and but they were still a mess. So I had seen this here online somewhere, and there were these big things, and they hang on the closet and whatever. But because I use mine all the time, I already knew that I wanted mine to be smaller so that it's more usable for me. So my thought was, if I make it narrow enough, I can actually just hang it on the back of my crafting chair, or on any chair that's near me, or beside my cabinet. I do have one cabinet in the living room here where I have needles and notions, and where I have all kinds of things, and you can have a suction cup there and you can hang it. Fairly inexpensive. You can buy your needle your needle gauge tools, and anyways, then if I do need to have if I do need to put the stitches for a sleeve on waste yarn, which I said before I do not like, I use one of my gazillion needles, and I buy them on sale all the time because I love the thinner needles for that purpose. I slip them on here. I put, I'll show you in 1 second, I'll put elastics on the ends because they're going to be my little rubber stopper so nothing falls off. And when it comes time to pick up these stitches, I'll just knit them right off. I don't need to take 10 minutes to pull them onto the waste yarn or clean them up and pick them back off. I don't have any of those issues. I just use my needles, I stick them on, and since I made this guy here, the ones that I do offer for sale on my Modern Needle Facebook store, I have a piece of plastic running through here where you can put little cards in to say this size needle, this size needle, this size needle, if that is what you would like. I believe at this moment I am sold out of these, but I will restock, and all of the information is on my Facebook page if you're interested in any of those. And of course, they just hang on the side of my chair. With my crochet hooks, there's a different thing that I use, because the crochet hooks are shorter, so there's all kinds of different things that you can use. If you only have a few, you can put them in here. If you are a collector like I am, until I got to clover or more hooks, and I'm just going to briefly throw that in there. I have arthritis in my hands, and I have rheumatoid issues, so I had to give up crochet for quite some time because I use a pencil grip, and for people that don't know what that is, I will show you exactly what that is. But I have the hook here. I use a pencil grip and it really killed the pad of my thumb. And my sister, who is an avid crocheter, uses the knife grip. And when I learned in school, we actually learned knife grip and we learned pencil grip, but then you develop your own favorite style of doing it. But I knew both ways. So I thought, oh, well, maybe if I use pencil grip instead of knife grip, sorry, the other way around, if I use knife instead of pencil, maybe my hand won't hurt. And wouldn't you know? So here is actually one. This here is one of the bigger clover hooks, and pencil grip is just like it says, it's this way, and knife grip is this way. And now I can crochet for a very long time without any hand pain. And it took a little bit to actually force my hands to do the knife grip, but as soon as I would switch to the pencil grip, I would get a couple of stitches in and my thumb was just, that's it, you're off for a couple of days because you're an idiot for not remembering you're supposed to do it the other way. So anyways, as you can see, lots of tools and notions here. I bought this thing here at Michael's. They're stackable Christmas things. I don't know what you're supposed to put in there, but as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, notions, and they stack, and they were like 80% off or whatever they were, which was actually fantastic. So as you can see, there's lots of different hooks, but the clover, I think from a size 6.5 or 7 on, they're kind of like this format, and this is no longer metal but plastic to keep them light. On the coating for the clover hooks, there's a coating on here, and even though they look exactly like a million other hooks that you can see on Amazon or whatnot, it is not the same. There is a coating on there that makes them glide through whatever you're crocheting so much easier. So because you're not having to work with the force of forcing the hook through the yarn, or sorry, not through the yarn, if you're not forcing the hook through the blanket or through the fabric that you're creating, you can crochet a lot longer and you can crochet a lot faster because it just glides through that thing, and it is fantastic. I can only recommend them. Since then, I have bought another set because, as you know, you need like 10 sets of everything because your couch eats half of it. I have also bought other hooks because really the bling of crafting is always there. So I have bought other hooks, but I always fish out these, and they're actually in this thing here, not a clover hook to be found because they're in a special case and they're over there, so that I don't have to fish because I've done that before. So that's one way where I organize my hooks. And then of course everybody has DPNs or long needles or what have you. I use these little pencil grips to keep them together, because there is nothing more annoying than having to go into your basket and you only have 1 or 2 of the needles and there are supposed to be 5. So, or here in Canada, even though they're getting better, 4. Now another place where I do keep them is this thing here, because I do teach. I very often bring needles or notions or what have you, so they're all in here. I use these elastic bands here to snap them together. These are all 6s, and because I knit mittens or whatever, often I do 2 at a time. Where I don't want to use magic loop, I use this. So I do clip them together, but I have another one of these also with crochet tools and hooks and what have you, and I can display them like this on top of my book cabinet because I'm one of the ones that needs it all hanging out. So that's that. Let me see. So I talked about these. I talked about how to turn them into stitch markers. Another thing, okay, I do have on my shelf here, I have a thing like this where maybe dollar store or wherever I got it. We have a couple of other things that help me keep my work organized. Because I have Raynaud's in my hand, which is really a rheumatoid issue, my pads of my fingers often get irritated, dried, cracked, and what have you. However, when they are in a sore state, it's not like I can just sit here and watch TV and do nothing. That's not going to happen. So what I do is, at the dollar store, you can buy these silicone things. I think paper crafts or whatever. These are silicone. Of course, my fingers are bigger than these things are. I think they're made for baby fingers. God knows what they are. Anyways, I do cut them so that when I knit, I can have these little fingertips on and it doesn't poke my skin. The other thing that happens is that these pads under here, they get extremely rough. So I always have a nail file here where I actually file my skin. And that kind of seems to help that out a little bit. So those things here live in here. I have bobby pins because besides my homemade stitch markers, which I absolutely love, there are a gazillion metal ones with all kinds of things on it. However, I always look for the elastic ones, and I have I always use a traffic light system. So if I have a red marker, that means I need to stop. Red markers are always my end around, or a different pattern is starting, or whatever. A red marker always tells me stop somewhere and look. And I mean, you can get a gazillion colors. For the same pattern repeats, because I do lace and I do cables and I do all kinds of things. So like colored markers are in the like colored patterns. Red is always end of the round, or pay attention because something is coming up. I use bobby pins for crochet, or okay, so I tell you how I use them for crochet first. When you crochet and you don't pay attention, you're thinking either grow or it can shrink. So use the bobby pins to clip them in the first and into the last stitch. You come up to your work, and all you need to do is, let me see, where are we? Okay. All I need to do here is I need to pull that up, and that's actually where my last stitch goes. There is no growing, there is no shrinking. It is all the same size, and unless your tension is off, it'll stay the same size because you know exactly where your first and your last stitch goes. So for crochet, absolutely love it. When I knit and I drop a stitch, let's say, I don't know, I dropped it down here. You can ladder down and pick up that stitch down here. However, depending on how far it went down, even when you block the socks and whatever, some things it doesn't matter, but some things it does. If it's too far down, your ladder will never look beautiful even when you block that garment. So what I tend to do is I put a bobby pin and hold that stitch. This is not going to stretch the stitch. It's not going to do anything. It'll just hold it. And then when my garment or whatever it is that I'm doing, when that is finished, I will take a piece of yarn and thread it through that loop, pull it to the back, clean it up. Nobody will know that I dropped that stitch because I cleaned it up. It's not going to go anywhere. And I didn't disturb the front facing fabric with laddering down. So bobby pins for me, I buy them all the time. I buy different colors and I buy all kinds of things. The pencil grips help me organize. I have tubes that are medical tubes for everything. I love recycling things. Oh, this is a button tin. There's one more thing that I did want to show you that I use to organize just my area. You can buy these little elastics. I think these are for the bracelets or whatever, and you can buy a whole bag of 500 for, sometimes you get them for a couple of dollars, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. These thin elastics, they don't really make good, they're not very good around tins or whatever to hold them, but what they are fantastic for is when you have your knitting needles, so let's say these are my sock needles. These are my Addy sock needles. They have a blunt tip and they have a sharp tip for lace. But let's say I'm putting something on hold, or I'm holding two needles together because I gathered my stitches from around the arm. I'll pop these on. Even when the elastic is not on tight, if there's stitches on here, they are not going anywhere. It forms a natural break pad and holds them in line. So let's say there's a cable here and there's all kinds of stitches on here. They're not going anywhere. If I have socks and I don't have enough sock protectors, which are also going to be on sale at in the Facebook stores. Well, actually, here I show you. If I don't have enough, of those, you can pop these things onto the end of your needles. And just by not moving anywhere, you can see on my hands that I'm actually giving it quite a bit of a yank. These are not going anywhere until I physically remove this. If they break, it doesn't really matter. They're not a huge concern. If I would have to cut it open, they're not a huge concern. Sometimes they do get brittle and they break. It's also not a huge concern, but they are reusable. So when they're still good, I stick them back in there, and that's that. So let me see. Let me think if I have talked about everything that I want to talk about so far. Because the first thing that I did want to talk about is addressing clean up your space. So as a summary of all the chatter that went on before is figure out what kind of a crafter are you. Not your neighbor, not your mother, not anybody, but you. Because in reality, if you don't clean up the way that it makes sense to you, it's not going to matter, because it's going to look clean for 10 seconds and you got all your stuff back out and you're going to be in your own style before you know it, which is, if you're super duper tidy, great. If you're not, then figure out what is it that you can do today to make that space better. And if you can't do it today, because you either want to buy a couple of bins or you want to buy a couple of items to help you clean up, whatever it is, really try to figure you out, because that'll help you not only be a better crafter, but manage your space and your resources better. Because if you can find your things, you can create more. If you're more efficient with your time, you can create more. And that is always my issue, is if you spend a ton of time looking for things or cleaning up, well, I'd rather spend my time knitting or crocheting, to be honest with you. So figure out what can you do today to make that better, and not just moving it back and forth. One more thing that I did want to mention very briefly is we all have a gazillion patterns. So I stopped printing out a whole bunch. However, the ones that I have printed out and the ones that I'm working with, I love these shower clips, really. They're from the dollar store, I think. It doesn't matter what kind of rings you use for this. When I'm working on a pattern, the first thing that I do is I read through it and I highlight my size. It'll give me a quick indicator of, do I understand the pattern? Does it make sense to me? What is it that I need to pay attention to? And plus, once I highlight it, I'll find it easy because I kind of know what's going on. I put them in these sheet protectors. And when I'm finished with them, what's going to happen is I put them all into one and I file them on my bookshelf. This way I have a little suction cup thing on the side of my little bookshelf in the living room where that stuff goes. I can hang it on there and I know it's there. If I need to throw it into one of my project bags, I just either fold it this way and I stick it in my project bag, or it's big enough that it fits into my project bag like this. But it is all together. My pages are together. I don't need to worry about it. If I need to pull it out and write something on it, like I usually start it to put a date on it when I start and when I finish a project. I also keep that stored in Ravelry. The first thing that I do usually is when I pick a pattern and I pick the yarn and I pick the hook or the needles, I take a picture with the camera, because you'll have a gazillion projects that have no hook in it, that have the wrong interchangeable needle in it because you needed the needles for something else. And then of course you don't notice that you changed out the needle because you don't remember, but all of a sudden you're knitting and you're thinking, that looks kind of different or weird. So keep that in mind. So the patterns are stored with my things, and I actually shrunk my space a lot, which in reality I like. I don't need to have everything out. The stuff that I have out needs to be functional and still satisfy that I see everything, but I want to have it less messy. I want to have my kitchen table accessible, not full of stuff all the time, because that's just how I craft. So now, even if I need to clean it up in a hurry, I can fold this. The ones that I sell on Facebook have a little tab with the snap button that just folds together. So actually you can take your couch into your bag and off you go. You always have whatever you need with it. Figure out who you are, what is your style, and use that to your advantage. Because if we craft the way that your brain works, you will always get the maximum out of your time, your space, your resources, and whatever else you have. So I believe I did share everything that I wanted to share with you today. My plan is I'm gonna upload another video in about 2 weeks. I think every 2 weeks is probably a good time. And now that we're actually thinking about the space constructively and learning or cleaning it up. And you don't have to do it the same way that I do it, but think about it, and then you'll come up with your own ideas with how your brain works. These videos are just in order to enable you to use all of you. Use all of you to do all of you. The next time that I upload a video, I want to talk about organizing the rest of your stash. How do you read the band label? How does that even help you in anything? The video after that, I'm thinking we're going to talk about gauge or attention. Little things, blow them up. Why does my stuff not fit? We'll organize the stash first, and then we get into that. Another video that I want to talk about, now that we've organized the stash and you have a lot of things that what do you do with it? Another video is, do we want to sell stuff or do you not want to sell stuff? How does that work? Is that worth your time or not? So anyways, that is the direction that I want to take the channel in. The next video is stash management. The video after that is, now that I cleaned up my stash, what are some of the things that I can do with my stash? Until then, feel free to like, share, subscribe. Visit my store on Facebook. It is The Modern Needle. My daughter's store is Mad Bags. If I manage it, I'll post some affiliate links to the clover hooks, to Amazon, to help you look it up. Happy crafting until next time, and it was my pleasure.